What's up, dudes and dudes to the Urinal? My name's Seth, and today I'm going to show you how you can technically solo the Dreadnought. Now, I say technically because it is entirely possible to actually solo this boss with this strategy. However, it takes like a million zillion years unless you, of course, end up having like a really, really powerful Ice Age. And even in that case, you're going to be stuck doing your normal shots. So are you doing that much damage with your normal shots? I don't think so. Now, the reason that I say this method has worked is I have tested it out. I actually did end up duoing, that is to say 2 players, myself freezing the boss and keeping him slow, and then Merc on his Fey Trickster. So technically we actually both ended up completing Ultra Dreadnought, because he was pretty much the only one that was actually doing damage in the entire group. So I just wanted to point that out and let you all know that this isn't actually a thing. You're pretty much going to need an Ice Sage if you want to get through this guy quick as possible. And most of all because of the survivability, because Dreadnought is going to have a variation of different attacks. But the most deadly of all isn't the nuke that drops into the middle of the map where you have to hide over in each of the corners or just dodge at the perfect amount timing to end up avoiding the explosion. That's going to one-shot you through Death Defying and through pretty much everything else. No. What actually is the most deadly of the boss is his constant stream of just single shot lasers. Now, the way that Trove works with its AI is that when a projectile is fired from an enemy, it's automatically going to be fired where your character is going. It's always going to calculate that. So if we're running to the right, he's going to shoot and it's going to hit us. It's going to anticipate us no matter what. So the way that you usually end up duking out, is the term, dodging ranged attacks is you'll be moving in one direction, wait for the projectile to fire, and then as soon as it does, you turn and go into the other direction. That's how you normally end up dodging ranged attacks. Dreadnought's projectiles are very, very fast, and thus it makes it pretty much impossible to do. You can kind of do it, but it's not really something that's viable. You can dodge at least one of them, get hit by a second projectile, and then dodge the second one, so you could kind of do this. I do want to point out too, before we get started with the boss here, that unfortunately the Revenant passive ability down here, which actually does say that it triggers a taunt, hashtag confirm the devs have said that this taunt does not work on Shadow Titan bosses, thus making it, in my mind, the most useless subclass ability in the entire game, because you don't need it for normal enemies, that's for sure. Now, let's get started. Your number 1 is going to be the key thing that you're going to be doing here. I don't have like fully starred out like, stellar gear or anything like that. However, I'm just rocking some decent stuff. Energy regen on your staff is going to be the most important of all. And then otherwise, honestly, none of the air stats really matter, because you're not going to be doing this for the damage. Even though I'm at 17 KPR, most of all that's just because of my gems, because I'm sitting at over 6 mil health, just so that I have that survivability, because anytime he ends up hitting me with his laser, it gives me at least 1 extra hit. Now, if you want to be pretty much what the best tank in the game is right now, because Dreadnought is actually the strongest and thus requires the highest tank, is you're going to have your number 1 going on, but then you're also going to have Cubic Curtain. Now, this is very, very cool how this ends up working out. I want to give a shout out to my man Nintendo Gamer, because he actually noticed it while I was fighting the boss. I didn't even think about it. Cubic Curtain is going to dominate the damage that is being reduced with our shield right here, because as we have our shield up, he's going to hit us with his laser once and it's going to get rid of our shield. Thus you can recast. Now, while that is perfectly fine, you can get through the boss without issue by doing that, it does tend to become a little bit tricky. So what Cubic Curtain is going to do is going to actually dominate over that. So long as Cubic Curtain is on cooldown, it's going to end up negating all of the damage from one of those shots, and thus make the boss fight a little bit easier as far as tanking is concerned. Now, because the taunt doesn't work, I do want to say that the way that aggro works in Trove is a little bit weird. You're going to want to try and stay up in his face as much as possible. Don't really move the boss around very much, because as soon as he starts going after one of your damage dealers, it means that they're going to end up pretty much taking a death-defying vial every single time that he shoots his laser at them, right? So you want to try and avoid that at all costs. Generally, I find that so long as the boss ends up aggroing one of the side enemies or anything like that, just pop your ult while you're beside him, because then it's like the game kind of registers the hit per second rather than the actual damage that you're doing to the boss, and I think that's what's actually going to take the aggro back to yourself. So, without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to show you, that's his auto attack right there. There was our Cubic Curtain. There was, I guess, just our barrier in general. Why am I actually avoiding? Oh, okay. I was sitting here wondering, why isn't he taking my barrier away? It's because we're actually sitting on hard mode. There was our cubic curtain again. Hard mode actually is just not getting rid of my barrier, apparently. So in ultra mode, he does actually take care of it every shot. Or maybe we're getting a graphical bug going on right now. I'm not exactly sure. The way that the boss actually works as far as his damage is concerned, that purple barrier he has go around him is going to actually make him immune to magic damage. And anytime he ends up stopping in place, usually it's a good idea to go up to his side, because it means that chances are he's going to be doing a melee attack or something of that effect. That right there, while originally when we first saw the Dreadnought, I thought that that was going to end up being kind of a warning that, oh, he's about to attack. The yellow barrier that surrounds him is actually going to be a physical barrier, so keep that in mind. And I don't really know how it works exactly for the Shadow Tower bosses, because when you use your ult as the Ice Sage, it's not going to end up freezing any of them, but I think that it does still make the boss vulnerable to 20% extra damage from yourself and others, as far as I know. I do actually find it very, very strange right now why we're taking damage, because when I'm in Ultra Towers, straight up, I'm not taking any damage from this guy. So maybe we've got something going on right here where we're negating damage. Okay, so let's just do that, recast, even though that was cubic curtain. That wasn't actually him doing his everything. That projectile is going to be what kills you. So as long as the devs don't end up patching it, which is going to be the big issue if they do. Again, that was our cubic curtain triggering, because honestly speaking, for the most average of players, this is the only way that I can find that's viable for you to actually end up beating the Dreadnought. Of course, they want it to be like a full-on endgame boss, and I do want to say this, I do want to stress this enough and say that if the devs do end up actually watching this and sitting there thinking, well then we should change it so that cubic curtain doesn't work, or that the Ice Sage doesn't work, or that the slowdown doesn't work, because that's the other thing too, is while you might be sitting here thinking that our barrier is what's actually keeping us alive, the biggest thing is that while we're attacking him with our basic attack, he is actually being slowed down. Very similar to how you can technically solo Daughter of the Moon with the Ice Sage as well. That's something that we learned a long time ago, and then I just tried it out on Dreadnought, and surprisingly, it ended up working, because your normal left-click attack, or RT, I guess, for console players, your normal attack is not really going to end up slowing any of the other bosses, so it was really, really strange that suddenly it just ends up actually working on the Dreadnought. Now, as you can see, we're doing like no damage to him. Like I said, that's where you keep in mind that technically you could solo him, it just would take like 5 zillion hours. And again, you know, despite the fact that we are still taking damage from him, I'm gonna try and just start casting my number 1 more often and see whether or not it actually ends up causing a problem, because again, that little single target shot that he does, that's what ends up doing it. That's what ends up killing you. Now, that's the whole thing, is if the devs end up ever patching this or anything like that, it means that for the most part, this boss is going to be impossible for starting players. Now, again, he's definitely difficult, don't get me wrong. I know I kind of just keep repeating that, but really, you all know how difficult the Dreadnought is, and I'm not trying to say that this is some type of a strategy or exploit that you can end up actually using on him. You do still have to stay sharp, stay focused, because when you're an Ultra, especially, if he ends up hitting you anytime with your barrier down, like usually he'll hit me, my barrier will go down, and then if you don't recast right away, you're going to end up taking a pot. So top that with however much damage your group is doing, how long do you actually have to survive on this boss? That's the important thing to keep in mind. And again, as you can see, pretty much always step to the left or right as soon as he stops moving, because that's going to end up being when he ends up doing damage. His stomp attack as well, when we get to the later phases, for those of you that don't know what Dreadnought is, his later phases, he's going to jump up in the air and smash down on the ground. He also is going to end up throwing Molotov cocktails, as far as I could tell anyways, around the map, meaning that he's going to start setting fire to the arena, so it thus makes it a little bit more difficult for the dodging, because you're going to have to try and avoid that fire, which of course is why, again, you're going to want to try and stay in his space and also try to keep the aggro off your team as much as possible, because if he starts attacking the other members, they're going to start draining pots every second. Now, if we swap over to the Gunslinger right here, just because he's my strongest class for the Shadow Towers right now. Let me start draining some of my pots here just so I can get the chromatic going. Hopefully I'm strong enough that I can actually get this guy to like a later phase so I can kind of show you what his nuke is going to be. So let me just do that. Okay, so there is the fire attack that I was mentioning. It can actually stick to walls, and most deadly of all is if it goes over into the corners, because that's where you're gonna have to try and dodge his nuke if he ends up actually doing that. And another thing too to keep in mind is that while you can see that we've actually swapped over to a damage character, it means that we don't have any more health. My Ice Sage has a lot of health. That's kind of why the survivability was definitely up. There's his jump attack as well, so you want to try and stay out of the center. But for every laser that he's shooting, we're taking a pot. So I've already only got 7 death defying left. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to solo this guy as a damage dealer, only as an Ice Sage being a tank. And I think that's actually really cool that that strategy ended up working, because otherwise the Ice Sage is pretty useless for Shadow Towers, honestly. You can end up using it at like Ultra Daughter, again, because the same strategy does end up working on her, except when you get her to the later phases, of course, she has a lot less attacks and less ranged attacks to deal with. So as long as you can end up getting through that and get to the final phase, she's actually quite easy to solo. Now, again, like we're sitting here on Dreadnought and I'm at 23k PR on my Gunslinger and I've only got 3 more pots left. I don't even think I'm going to be able to actually solo this guy. Maybe if I ended up actually triggering, oh, my subclass ability unequipped, that's what's going on. I would recommend using the Barb subclass ability for the Gunslinger anyways, and I'll talk about subclass abilities that are ideal for some of the other characters in the game, so don't worry about that. There goes our last pot, and even though he's really, really weak, we still ended up getting wrecked. So if I ended up having my subclass ability, I would have probably been doing enough damage to actually take care of him. But most of all, again, this video was to actually show you the strategy for fighting Dreadnought. So I hope that that's what this video ended up doing for you. I hope I covered everything. Otherwise, you can leave questions in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Very much appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, favorite, and subscribe for more daily content, as well as building up loyalties points that you can end up using on my merch store. Links are in the description for that. Sayonara and stay epic, everybody. Good luck fighting the Dread.